I remember the exact moment my brother lied to me. Except he didn't. At least, that's what he said. And the strange part is, I was so sure he had. It started on a completely ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Nothing special, just one of those quiet moments where you randomly revisit the past. Birthdays, road trips, blurry selfies, little fragments of life frozen in time. Then I came across a picture from years ago. My brother and I were standing outside our old house, both of us laughing at something just off camera. It looked normal, familiar, but something about it felt off. I stared at it longer than I expected to, and then it hit me. This was the day we had that argument. I could almost feel it again. The heat in my chest, the frustration, the way he had looked at me, dismissive, like what I was saying didn't matter. I remember thinking back then, he doesn't even listen to me. The memory felt clear, solid, real. So I texted him, "Hey, random question. Do you remember that argument we had outside the house? The one where you told me I was overreacting?" He replied a few minutes later, "What argument?" I paused. I assumed he just didn't remember. It had been years after all. "You know," I typed back, "when I was upset about college stuff and you said I was making a big deal out of nothing." There was a longer pause this time. Then he replied, "I never said that." I stared at the message. For a second, I almost laughed. It felt like one of those classic moments where someone just refuses to admit they were wrong. But something about his tone didn't feel defensive. It felt confused. I called him. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Yeah," he said calmly. "I honestly don't remember anything like that." I felt a small wave of irritation. Of course you don't, I thought. But then he said something that made me hesitate. He added, "I do remember that day, but we didn't argue. You were stressed, yeah, but we just talked. I actually tried to calm you down." That didn't make sense, because in my mind, it wasn't a vague memory. It was detailed, specific. I could hear his voice. I could feel how dismissed I felt. "I remember exactly what you said," I insisted. There was a quiet pause on the line. Then he said, "What if you remember how you felt, but not what actually happened?" That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. After we hung up, I sat there, still holding my phone, replaying the memory again. I tried to look at it more carefully this time. At first, everything felt the same. The tone, the tension, the frustration. But then I started noticing small gaps. I couldn't actually hear the exact words anymore, just the feeling of what I thought he said. That was strange. I remember thinking, wait, did he really say that? Or did I just assume it? That question bothered me more than I expected. Because if I was wrong about this, what else had I remembered wrong? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not in a dramatic way, just this quiet curiosity that kept showing up in random moments. While driving, while working, even while talking to people. I started noticing how often I filled in gaps without realizing it. Like when someone gave me a short reply and I immediately assumed they were annoyed. Or when a conversation felt awkward and I later remembered it as worse than it actually was. I began to question something I never questioned before. How much of what I remember is actually real, and how much of it is just my interpretation? A week later, I decided to test it. I met a friend for coffee, someone I trust, someone who pays attention to details. Halfway through our conversation, we started talking about a mutual friend who we argued about months ago. I described the situation the way I remembered it. "She got really defensive," I said, and then she kind of shut the conversation down. My friend tilted her head slightly. "That's not how I remember it," she said. I felt that same subtle tension again. "What do you mean?" "She didn't get defensive. You did." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt familiar, that same quiet contradiction. We talked through it calmly, no argument, no pressure, just comparing perspectives. And slowly, something became clear. We weren't remembering two different events. We were remembering the same event, but through two completely different emotional filters. I remembered her tone as defensive because I felt attacked. My friend remembered me as defensive because she saw how I reacted. Neither of us was lying, but neither of us was fully accurate either. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It settled in slowly, like something shifting quietly in the background. I started thinking about how memory works, not in a scientific way, just in a personal, everyday sense. Every time I recalled something, I noticed I wasn't just replaying it. I was reconstructing it, adding meaning, filling in blanks, connecting emotions to moments. And the strange part was, it felt completely natural. I never noticed it happening. It made me think about how many assumptions I've carried over the years. How many times I've believed this is what happened, when in reality, it was just what made sense to me at the time. And then one night, something small happened that made everything click. I was texting someone, a simple conversation. At one point, they replied with just, "Okay," nothing else. Immediately, I felt it. That slight discomfort. That sounded cold, I thought. I started building a story in my head. Maybe they were annoyed. Maybe I said something wrong. But this time, I paused, because now I recognized the pattern. Instead of reacting, I asked, "Hey, quick question. Did that message come off a bit off? Just checking." They replied almost instantly, "Oh no, not at all. I was just busy for a second." And just like that, the entire story I had started creating collapsed. That moment felt small, but it stayed with me, because it showed me something very simple but very real. My brain doesn't just remember things, it interprets them. And sometimes it gets it wrong. Not on purpose, not maliciously, just quietly. Over time, I started becoming more aware of it. Not in a paranoid way, but in a curious way. Whenever I felt strongly about a memory, I would pause and ask myself, do I remember what actually happened, or do I remember how I felt about it? And surprisingly, those two weren't always the same. I started noticing how emotions shape memory, how discomfort turns neutral moments into negative ones, how assumptions fill in gaps we don't even realize exist, how confidence doesn't always mean accuracy, and maybe the most surprising part, how easily we trust our own version of the past. Looking back now, I don't feel upset about that memory with my brother anymore. In fact, it feels almost distant. Not because it didn't matter, but because I understand it differently now. Maybe he didn't dismiss me. Maybe I just felt unheard, and my brain built a memory that matched that feeling. That doesn't make me wrong, but it doesn't make me completely right either. And that realization changed something in me. Not dramatically, just quietly. I became a little more patient, a little more open, a little less certain that my perspective is the only truth. Because the truth is, our minds are constantly trying to make sense of the world. And sometimes, in that process, they rewrite parts of it. Not to deceive us, but to protect us, to simplify things, to create meaning. And the scary part isn't that it happens, it's that we usually don't notice it at all. Now, whenever I think about a past moment, especially one that carries emotion, I don't just ask, what happened? I also ask, what might I have added to it? Because maybe the memory isn't fake, but maybe it's not as complete as I believe. And if that's true, then how many of the stories we carry about people, about ourselves, about our past, are actually built on something that quietly changed over time? And if our memories can shift without us realizing it, then what does that say about the way we judge others, or even ourselves?